Well, 2024 was definitely a year for music. In case you needed a reminder of what happened this year, several bands announced comebacks. Mike Portnoy rejoined Dream Theater. Post Malone and Beyonce both released country albums. Diddy happened. Enough said. Gojira and Knocked Loose both made Facebook users clutch their pearls and all have a collective cry, which was hilarious. Taylor Swift was everywhere and made $2 billion while doing so. As I Lay Dying situation got a whole new definition of sad that I don't even want to joke about it, and Raygun embarrassed this country in more ways than one. But hey, on the plus side, Dave Grohl had another daughter, unfortunately for the wrong reasons. But if there's one thing that stayed consistent in 2024, it was that albums were released. And this video is a list of my favorite albums from 2024. Before we get started, we are going to go over a few rules. Number one, I am not Anthony Fantano. I have not listened to every album that came out this year, otherwise I wouldn't have a life. Number two, I will not be listing any live albums, cover albums, or EPs. Number three, I will be mainly listing albums that are in the rock and the metal categories. However, there are a couple of odd ones out. And finally, number four, these albums are in no particular order. There are no rankings for this video, aside from my favorite album for the year, which we will get to. I'll start off with a couple of honourable mentions. These are albums that I thoroughly enjoyed, but not enough to put them on the main favourites list. Starting off with Throne with their debut album, Excessive Guilt. The debut album from the Swedish hardcore/metalcore band was something that I was definitely excited for, considering that 5 of the songs had already been previously released. Seeing them open for Alpha Wolf in Sydney this year was definitely something that got me hyped up even more for this album. At a runtime of 20 minutes, this album contains songs that don't go over 3 minutes, which isn't something I'm necessarily a fan of. The album kind of just goes in one direction and one direction only. Nevertheless, great album. Next up is an album that I didn't really expect to enjoy, and that is Billie Eilish with Hit Me Hard and Soft. I'm not a massive Billie Eilish fan, but I knew that this was an album that people were going to be talking about for a while, so I thought, fine, I'll listen to it. And I was very surprised. The chorus for Lunch was immediately stuck in my head. It was very, very catchy. And the song overall just had a great groove and a great feel to it. It's a very emotional listening experience with emotional songs such as Skinny, Chihiro, and Blue. There were a couple of points on the album where it just felt unnecessary or just a bit too long, but nonetheless, this was a very surprising album and one that I didn't really expect to like. Lastly, on the honourable mentions list, we have got the new album from Palais Royale called Death or Glory. This album was originally on my favourites list, but after I listened to it more and more, I started to have more and more opinions. I still enjoyed this album. My favourite songs are Showbiz, Mr. Devil, Ache in My Heart, and Self-Loathing Conversation. It was really surprising to see them drift from their edgier sound, which was something that I liked most about Palais. I also think that some of the lyrical choices that Remington makes are a little bit odd, particularly on the album's title track. The lyrics where he's talking about cancel culture and modern issues, while they are important to talk about, it kind of just made me feel a little bit off. Nonetheless, there isn't really anything more about this album that I can complain about. All right, we're going to start the favorites list with probably my favorite album of 2024, and that is Green Day with Saviors. After the absolute dumpster fire that was Father of All and was probably my least favorite album of 2020, as well as some very basic cookie cutter pop rock songs that came after it, I had very low expectations when they started teasing new music. But once I heard the first single, The American Dream Is Killing Me, and saw that the album wasn't 26 minutes long, I was hooked back in again. The 2 singles that followed were just as strong, with my favorite being Dilemma. Saviors contains some of Green Day's best work in years, and there are absolutely no weak tracks on here. Despite having very low expectations, this album is probably my favorite of 2024. Now going down the list in no particular order, the next one I want to talk about is Bring Me the Horizon with Posthuman Next Gen. Look, I'm going to be honest, I was expecting this album to come out in 2031, but the second installment of the Posthuman series is very, very strong. After realizing that 9 songs is not an EP with the very strong first installment, Survival Horror, Next Gen is a proper album this time that sees the band going into more emo and pop punk territory with songs like Lost and Strangers, but still keeping the heavy side with Amen, Limousine, and Kool-Aid. It's no secret that Bring Me have always incorporated electronic elements throughout the last 15 years, but they really use it to their advantage on the OST interludes and RIP. I also think that ending the album with the very powerful Dig It was a great choice. Going the typical sad song route of talking about a sense of failure and self-hatred is a very powerful way to end a roller coaster of an album that is Post-Human Next Gen. Up next, we're going to be talking about Alpha Wolf with Half Living Things. I really enjoyed Alpha Wolf's previous album called A Quiet Place to Die, so I was really excited to see what direction the band would go in for their next album. I wasn't a big fan of their EP Withholding Absence, but I was really hooked on the first single called Bring Back the Noise. But what really got me excited for a new album was, of course, their collaboration with Ice-T called Sucks to Suck.
Your blade's too blunt. This is Alpha Wolf, motherfucker. You wanna die?
I just remember my brother saying to me when the song came out, "Hey, have you heard new Alpha Wolf yet?" And then I say with the straightest face imaginable saying, "Yes, it's fucking amazing." The album is a blend of new metal and metalcore, which I love. Kind of like the band stepping out of their comfort zone, especially with the song Whenever You're Ready. I always love it when metal bands go a little bit slower, so it's really no surprise that this was my favorite song on Half Living Things. Up next, we've got Knocked Loose with You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To. This is probably tied for my favorite album this year. Deep in the Willow and Everything Is Quiet Now were my favorite songs of 2023, so I was really excited when they announced this album. When the album finally came out, I was entranced. The album, although just less than 30 minutes long, has bangers from front to back. My favorite tracks include Slaughterhouse 2 with Chris Motionless, the two-parter tracks Moss Covers All and Take Me Home, Blinding Faith, and of course, also the Kimmel performance where people were literally crying on Facebook was just icing on a very, very beautiful cake. Next up, we've got Linkin Park with their first album in 7 years, From Zero. I'm going to be honest, before they announced their comeback, I was not expecting Linkin Park to return at all. It's obviously impossible to replace a voice like Chester Bennington's, so when I found out that they were back with a new album, new song, as well as a new singer, I, like a lot of people, was quite skeptical. Then when I heard the first single, The Emptiness Machine, I wasn't really impressed. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Emily Armstrong's vocals. I just thought that the song was pretty basic, although I have enjoyed it a lot more since the album came out. I was hopeful, however, because she could definitely sing the older songs and she could sing them very, very well. What really got me excited for this album was the second single, Heavy as the Crown. That chorus was immediately stuck in my head for days. And also her screaming on the bridge, which was very reminiscent of Given Up, was enough to convince me that she was the right person for the job for this new chapter of Linkin Park. Side note, I'm not going into any of the Scientology stuff. This is not the video for that. From Zero has elements of every Linkin Park album mixed into one. Heavy as the Crown, I Give You Everything I Have, Two-Faced, and Casualty are all reminiscent of the older, heavier albums like Hybrid Theory, Meteora, and The Hunting Party. Good Things Go and Over Each Other have the Minutes to Midnight / Living Things type sound. By the way, I covered Good Things Go a while ago, so you should definitely check that out, link in description. And finally, Stained has that One More Light / A Thousand Suns type sound. This was an album that I was listening to on repeat for maybe a week and a half, and it's still an album that I frequently come back to. Next up, we have Trapt with The Fall. I'm just kidding, that album's horrible. Moving on. Rob Scallon with Crowded Rooms. I've never heard Midwest emo and metal mushed into one, but this is a really good listening experience. Having watched Rob's video where he was talking about his struggles with bipolar 1 disorder made me see the album in a whole new light. It made me look at it as a man is actively crying for help. And this was also a bipolar type of listening experience. With heavy hitters such as Blast Beats and Melodies, Off and On, and No Sorrow Tomorrow, followed straight on sometimes by ballads such as You and Me and Impossibly, it makes for an album that can have a song for everybody. Speaking of Rob Scallon, the next album I want to talk about is Round 6 by 1st of October. For those of you that don't know, 1st of October is a band formed by Rob Scallon and fellow YouTuber Andrew Huan, where they get together in a studio and have to record a 10-track album in a 12-hour session. What I love about this project is that no album sounds the same. The first album, 10 Hours, definitely sounds like it was recorded in 10 hours. Gourmet Ravioli is if 10 Hours was made a little bit better. Gotta Record Everything Good is more experimental. Chaos is pretty heavy. And Across the Road is more laid back. Definitely influenced by the Beatles, considering that they recorded that album in Abbey Road. However, Round 6 is very video game inspired. There are sounds used by an SNES and a Game Boy and video game references across the board. A lot of that is used in the songs Dungeon Man, Final Boss, Let's Fight, and the title track, Round 6. There's also a song for everybody on this album. There are soft ballads like Infinite Lives and It's Time to Move On. They didn't forget about the heavy fans like myself with Infinite Knives. And also, I'm a full-grown man and I'm wearing a retainer is hilarious. 1st of October is definitely one of my favorite days on the calendar thanks to these guys. Alright, here's another odd one out, and it's Eminem with The Death of Slim Shady. I've been an Eminem fan since I was 7 years old. I'm nearly 21, and this is my favorite album that he's released since the Marshall Mathers LP 2. While I enjoyed his last album, Music to Be Murdered By, I couldn't help but think that some of the songs were just used as filler. And I was among the myriad of Eminem fans patiently waiting for a new album to come out. Then when he finally released the single Houdini, I was, like a lot of people, very excited. I had that hook stuck in my head for a very long time. And yes, I know it's sampled Leave Me Alone. The next single, Toby, was on the more serious side, which got me even more excited. Then when I found out, like 9 hours before the album came out, that The Death of Slim Shady was a concept album, I was over the moon. Because it's not a secret that I love concept albums. This album had everything. His goofy side with Houdini and Brand New Dance, the no-filter Slim Shady side like Road Rage and Habits, and of course, the Marshall Mathers side with Temporary and Somebody Save Me. My favorite song on the album, however, is Guilty Conscience 2. While there's no Dr. Dre feature, which disappointed me at first, what we got instead was a clear vision of Shady versus Marshall, with the song ending with the coup de grace moment, the shot between the eyes. Overall, amazing album. Up next, we're going to be talking about Poppy with Negative Spaces. I was never really into Poppy before this album came out, so I had never listened to her older material. I just still remember her from the I'm Poppy days where she would just scare the shit out of children.
Hi, Lucas. Hi. I just want to say hi to you.
Hi.
Jackson, hi.
Hi there. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Jeez.
I always knew that she could do heavier stuff, but I still wasn't interested. Then I heard her collaboration with Bad Omens, and then, of course, her collaboration with Knocked Loose. And more recently, her performance with Spirit Box at Louder Than Life. Negative Spaces came out on the same day that From Zero came out, and everyone on Twitter and Instagram were arguing about which one was better, which one you should listen to. That just made me want to jump out of a fucking window. And side note, can we just all respect everyone else's opinion and move on? I don't really get why this was such a heated debate. Let's just all agree that November 15th was a great day to be a metalhead, and we'll leave it at that. How does that sound? However, I finally listened to it and I was absolutely floored. Jordan Fish, ex Bring Me the Horizon, definitely made his presence known with the electronic elements, and also the Knocked Loose and Spirit Box influences really shine on this album. There are absolute bangers on this album, like They're All Around Us, Push Go, Nothing, and the title track, Negative Spaces. However, my favorite song out of this album is definitely Surviving on Defiance. Yeah, I get it. The song sounds a little bit too much like Deftones, but that chorus is still stuck in my head. It has been for weeks. This was definitely tied for Billie Eilish on the album that I didn't expect to like this much. These next two I've purposefully saved for last because I don't really have a lot of comments about them. First up, we've got Vended with their self-titled debut. I've been a big fan of Vended ever since they came out with their very first song called Asylum, and everything they've put out since then has been absolutely solid, and this album is no exception. My favorite songs from this album include Downfall, Where the Honesty Lies, Serenity, and The Far Side. I've always thought that Griffin Taylor has a very good singing voice, given that there are heaps of videos of him singing with his dad on stage. So I'm really happy that he's shown those qualities more on this album. Also, super solid instrumentation and overall just a fun album. And lastly, we're going to talk about Void of Vision with What I'll Leave Behind. It's really sad that Void of Vision are going to be breaking up because they were on their way to becoming huge in the Australian metal scene. They were playing at Knotfest, they were opening for Parkway Drive, they were on their way. I saw them for the first time at Knotfest in 2023 and thought to myself, oh, so that's what Lord Voldemort has been up to. But jokes aside, they were extremely solid, and this album is just a testament to that. Look, I will admit, I was late to the party. I'm actually going to check how much I've got on my camera. Fuck. I will admit, I was late to the party. I did listen to the album after they announced that they were breaking up, but I love this album. The chorus for Neurotic is an absolute earworm, and Blood for Blood is a song that I could definitely see people losing their fucking mind to. It's definitely a shame that the journey is ending for Void of Vision, but they're ending on a high, and I wish them nothing but the best for their future musical endeavors. And that's it. Those are my favorite albums of 2024. Let me know what your favorite albums were this year, and I'll see you in the new year. See you later.